Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here. I figured today was as good as any day to update news about Total War Warhammer 2, which of course will be focusing mostly on Lizardmen information, because that has been confirmed as the first race that's going to be released, or showed off at the very least, for Total War Warhammer 2, which leads us to this letter that they put out yesterday, which of course normally the letters precede a trailer by usually a day, but in this case it preceded a pre-release trailer of the trailer, which is weird, but I guess maybe they ran into some issues so they decided to delay it by a day. But let's go ahead and I'm going to read through this, and we'll kind of talk about everything that is kind of hinted at or shown off or anything like that. It says, "Your Grace, excuse the rushed nature of the arcane encryptions upon this scroll, but I have to work fast. We have found the fallen gates. It is as the Loremasters predicted, dormant. Felistarian has already begun the rites of initiation. She remains confident that we can open the gate and funnel the wind of Azir in its purest form to sure up the great ritual. We know the plan is not without risk. We know what lurks on the other side of the gate, but the vortex falters, and if it should fail, then the fate of all Asur is unthinkable. Prince Teclis's fears about the indigenous ones have proven valid. Felistarian says they are no threat, and continues to focus on awakening the gates. But at night I know things watch us from the tree line. The fauna grows hostile. We hear their hungry roars. I wish to engage with them, to explain why we are doing this, tell them it is to save the world. But Felistarian says they are primitives who would not understand. I am unconvinced. Every mage in the White Tower knows of the power that is hidden within those ancient jungle temples. In any case, we must act quickly, because something or someone is coming. The word Zodal haunts my dreams, but I do not know what it means. I can only hope it is not my doom. For the eyes of the Phoenix King, Arlius, emissary of Safari." So let's break down the important parts of this letter, take apart what it means, and most of this is probably in anticipation of the video that's coming out tomorrow. So working through this letter, the High Elves have apparently discovered the Fallen Gates, which are an actual thing that exists in Lestria. The location of the Fallen Gates, and I'll include a map right here, though it's kind of hard to see, is if you look at the top right of this map, you can see the Isthmus of Lustria, which is where Hexadol is located. And if you look in the very top left, just south of the Grey Guardians and the Forest of Ash, that's where the Fallen Gates are. So, first of all, what are the Fallen Gates? They are what are known as Monuments of the Old Ones, which are a collection of sites that have one of two purposes in general. Either they are something that was built by the old ones in the age that was, and they served a specific function, but after the old ones were lost, they either went inactive or their purpose has become vague and unknown to the Lizardmen. So that they just sort of are these sites of great, horrible, potent power, but in general the Lizardmen try not to mess with them, and if anything, just protect them. The second option, which is more likely, or not more likely, but rather what most of these are things that the Lizardmen have built at the Slaan's direction in hopes of finding out what happened to the old ones or reestablishing contact with them. But most of the monuments of the old ones are things that were built after the Great Catastrophe, that the Lizardmen have used to try and reach out across the cosmos to find what happened to their old gods. And these include things like the Sentinels of Ziddy, the Sentinels of Time, and they've also built things like the Golden Spire of Sotek, and a bunch of other ones, and most of them have a function of trying to establish contact or signal to the old ones where the Lizardmen are, but almost all of them are extremely, well, all of them are very powerful magical relics, or architecture rather. Now, as for the Fallen Gates themselves, they're one of the many sites that we don't know exactly what they do, which is probably why CA selected it. You can kind of just make up your own lore about what they do. So, based on this letter, it looks like Felistarian, who is a High Elf Archmage, guessing by the wording of everything about her, seems to believe that these gates can be opened, and by doing so they can channel the Wind of Heavens, or Azir, through them, and use that as a bolstering mechanic for the Vortex. And this kind of folds into the whole campaign mechanics of the second game, which is, of course, the High Elves and the Lizardmen trying to bolster the Vortex in their own ways, while the Dark Elves and the undisclosed fourth race, who is obviously the Skaven, are attempting to dismantle the Vortex for their own gains. Of course, the way the Lizardmen and the High Elves will go about defending the Vortex are very different. And I think this will be a good way of showing that, in that the High Elves have obviously come to the Fallen Gate anticipating that they can manipulate it, force it open, and use it to build up their own defenses. However, the High Elves there's two problems with that plan. One is that the Fallen Gates fall along the Great Warding, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, which means that to the Lizardmen, it's a very important site that should not be tampered with unless it's like the end of the world, because it functions as a crucial nexus point. It's actually one of the sites that has multiple ley lines crossing through it, which we'll talk about more in a minute when we talk more about news. And then the second reason it might not be wise to mess with it is mentioned in the letter, that says that the High Elves know that the plan is not without risk because of what lurks on the other side of the gate. So what that likely means is, if this gate can be used to channel one of the winds of magic through it in a pure form, that means it's probably a gateway to either the realm of chaos or something extremely similar. Somewhere where magic is so potent that you can tear one of the winds out of it, and it's like pure magic is extremely difficult to find and extremely rare. But anywhere where there's enough magic that it's in a pure form and there's a lot of it, there's going to be demons. There's going to be tons of demons. Or at the very least, something exceptionally dangerous. So while the High Elves may view this as an acceptable risk to bolster the Vortex, to the Lizardmen this probably looks like a frickin' suicide plan, and the High Elves are just about to open the gates of hell and usher in a new great catastrophe. So, which moves us, of course, on to later in the letter, where the writer of this, Arlius, who is an emissary of Safari, which, if you don't know, Safari is one of the I believe 12 kingdoms of Ulthuan. Maybe it's 10 kingdoms? It's 10 or 12, I always forget. And Safari is the kingdom where magic is at its strongest. It's the kingdom of wizards and mages and magical marvels and unbelievable architecture and floating fortresses and the Tower of Hoeth, which is unimaginably tall and enchanted. And it's where Teclis is from primarily, because he's the Loremaster of the White Tower. He's the High Loremaster. He's the big boss. And so it's likely that these guys have been landed on the Isthmus of Lustria to find these fallen gates, which they probably landed on the eastern coast, cut across past Hexadol to the western coast, with the Lizardmen watching them the entire way. And the Lizardmen probably gave them the benefit of the doubt and let them pass without interfering with them, but now the High Elves are trying to force open the gate. And from the wording of the letter, it looks like the Lizardmen have situated themselves around the fallen gates and are waiting for something. Now, Arlius clearly wants to try and go to the Lizardmen and explain, hey, we're not trying to wreck everything, we're trying to open the gate so that the world doesn't end. But Felistarian, who is clearly the idiot in this scenario, thinks that they don't need to do that, that the Lizardmen are too primitive, they won't understand, And Arlius goes on, of course, to say that he's unconvinced because every mage in the White Tower knows of the power that is hidden within those ancient jungle temples. Clearly, he's talking about the Slann at this point. He's probably referencing the Slann as a whole. I doubt he knows that Mazdamundi is nearby, because Mazdamundi is actually one of the closest beings to what they're doing, being in Hexadal. So it's quite likely that Arlius realizes that the Lizardmen are probably going to not understand what they're doing, because as far as the Lizardmen are concerned, the elves are just opening this fucking gate, and that's going to be a huge problem and is going to kill a lot of people and possibly wreck the vortex or usher in calamity. It might not even fix it. And the Slann would be aware of this because they understand the Great Warding far more than the elves ever. The elves don't even know the Great Warding is a thing. And like Teclis may suspect it, but most of them have no idea what it is or that it even exists. And the Slann designed the Great Warding, or they didn't design it to help the Vortex, but they repurposed it to help the Vortex. The Great Warding was designed by the Old Ones with the help of the Slann during the dawn of time in the Warhammer world to make the Geomantic Web. But the Slann probably view this as an idiot move that's going to harm the Great Warding, which will in turn weaken the Vortex, which will in turn maybe cause it to collapse, which will then usher in a new great calamity and the world will end. So what's probably this upcoming video is about is that at the end of this letter he says, in any case we must act quickly because something or someone is coming, and the word Zoldo haunts my dreams. But I do not know what it means. I can only hope it is not my doom. So it's quite likely, unfortunately for Arlius, that it is his doom. Zoldo quite obviously refers to Kroq-Gar, who is the last survivor of Zoldo. Zoldo was one of the numerous temple cities that were across Lustria that fell during the Great Cataclysm. It was a fairly important city, because it was the city that managed to stop the demons' first big success, which is that when the demons invaded Lustria, the Slann created magical domes of energy protecting each one of the temple cities that the demons, for all their hopes, couldn't figure out how to destroy. They just couldn't get through them. So what the demons figured out is that, I think it was Cairo's Fate Weaver, or at least, I know it was a Greater Demon of Tzeentch, but I'm pretty sure it was Cairo's, figured out that they didn't have to destroy the barriers. They could, using the winds of magic, which were something the Slann weren't particularly familiar with because they only existed once Chaos was born, the demons were able to rip open rifts to the realm of Chaos itself within the portals. So what they did to destroy a good number, like 3 or 4 cities in a row, was that they just ripped open these portals right next to where the Slann were sitting at the top of their temples, keeping this barrier open, and a bunch of demons just poured out and killed everybody. So what happened at Zoldo that makes it a really important city is that when the demons ripped open this same portal after a couple of cities had already fallen, the Slann of Zoldo were aware enough that they realized what was happening, and they sent warnings to all of the other Slann saying, hey, this is what the demons are doing, this is their new strategy, you need to adapt, before they got just absolutely murdered. So the Slann got torn apart, but in that moment they sacrificed themselves to buy all of the other temple cities time, because now the Slann enacted precautions and the demons weren't able to do that anymore. And these rifts were terrible, terrible things. They were how Sotek, which is the city of echoes, has a permanent chaos rift in it that flickers open every once in a while and pours out the occasional demon horde, because these spells were so potent. So the fact that the Slann of Zoldo were able to figure out what was going on and send a warning was a big deal. Of course, this is where Kroq-Gar is from, and he's the final survivor of his city. And he is, we'll talk more about him in just a minute because he got some concept art put out, but he's probably going to be featured in this trailer. Of course, we've already seen a small clip on Twitter that you can go find that shows Mazdamundi is obviously in the trailer, and it shows him probably casting his mind out to watch the High Elves get the crap kicked out of them. Like, you see him close his eyes and it changes to a scenic view of some pterodons flying. But it's likely that what Arlias has sensed, because the Wind of Heavens is all about manipulating the future and seeing the future and prophecy and all that other stuff. So it's quite likely that he, by them messing with the Wind of his ear, he picked up on his impending death, which is that Kroq-Gar is coming. And it's likely the reason the Lizardmen have surrounded the High Elves at the Fallen Gates but haven't attacked is because they've been waiting for Kroq-Gar to show up and lead the assault. And Mazdamundi probably sent Kroq-Gar. So that's pretty much everything that's important from this letter. I'm kind of glad they didn't show the trailer today, because I wanted to put out a video talking about it and sort of casting my predictions just to see if CA goes 100% with the hints they're throwing out, or what to kind of expect from these letters translating into trailers. But with that pretty much out of the way, we'll talk for just a few minutes about... I said I would talk about the Great Warning, so let's discuss that real quick. Then I'll talk about Kroq-Gar for a second. I'll talk about news that they've put out on the Lizardmen campaign, and then we're done. So, the Great Warning, this is kind of a two birds, one stone of what we've learned about the Lizardmen campaign so far from an article. And it doesn't detail a lot of new information, but it does tell us one new critical piece of information, which is that the way that the Lizardmen are approaching the Great Vortex, or the Vortex, is that they're going to be trying to shore up the Great Warding, which, when the Lizardmen first came to the world, were created on the world by the Old Ones. The Old Ones realized that the Earth itself had a lot of magic within it, or was generating magic through like tectonic shifts and all sorts of other nonsense. And what they did is, after they created the Lizardmen and started imposing their perfect utopia on the world, they moved the world closer to the sun so that life could change the way they wanted it to. Most of the big bads, like the largest of dragons, went to sleep for the rest of eternity and some other stuff. And the Lizardmen purged a lot of the undesirable races. The Lizardmen became the global empire. They ruled the entire world, essentially. And what they did is they went around the world building a bunch of sites on various points where these invisible lines called lines of power, or ley lines, crossed each other. So every nexus point where multiple lines would cross each other, whether it was just 2 lines or 8 of them, the Lizardmen would build something like a tower or a monolith or a temple city. And each of these sites was designed to harness that power and made the geomantic web into this huge reservoir of natural energy. And it is the most pure and powerful form of magic that exists. But it's also incredibly difficult to tap into, and it's also, in a way, a limited supply. So, like, the Slann don't like to mess with it too much. They use it when they have to, but they try not to. The reason a lot of people... but the other thing that's important about it is a lot of people struggle sometimes to understand how the Slann are the most powerful casters in the world, while also simultaneously, like, the Elves and the Greater Demons of Tzeentch, are also the most powerful casters in the world. And the reason there's a difference between the Slann and this other group is that the Slann were the most powerful casters in the world, period. But then Chaos came into the world and brought with them the Winds of Magic. Because what the Winds of Magic are is they're this horrible conglomeration of magic that's just gusting out of the realm of Chaos across the world constantly. And when that happened at the start of the Great Catastrophe, the Slann had no freaking idea how to control this stuff. So, like, the Slann were taking in magic the way they always had, but with the introduction of Chaos, magic now had this horrible taint to it. And when the Slann would unleash their spells, suddenly they started miscasting. Like, a Slann would unleash a super spell, and then the magic would slip from his control and he would explode. Or he would die instantly, or rot, or get ripped into the realm of Chaos. And to the Slann, this was a totally new thing. They'd never seen anything like this. And for them, who were so used to wielding the purity and the sacred magic of the geomantic web, and that being pretty much all there is, they were totally fucked at first by this. And the elves and the demons were able to adjust much more naturally to it, because the elves were designed by the old ones to be very in tune with magic naturally. And of course the demons are born from it. So they ended up becoming the preeminent casters of that type of magic, which is the winds of magic that are gusting around all the time. Of course, once the High Elves enacted the the vortex and sucked a bunch of magic out of the world, which is like a constant funnel at the bottom of the bathtub. Like the water, basically the vortex is like if you took a bathtub that was filled with water, you took out the plug, but then you kept the faucet running at maximum capacity. So like you're still draining the water, but you're not draining it fast enough to get rid of it. You're just draining it enough to like not drown. And when that happened, most of the magic left the world, which made a lot of the demons and a lot of the elven casters no longer capable of the absolute insane feats they used to be. Like, there would never be a mage again like Kalidor Dragon Tamer. Not because there's no mage who's as skilled as Kalidor Dragon Tamer, like Teclis obviously is, when he gets older, but there's not that much magic in the world. No elf can ever hope to achieve the feats of the elves of the prior age, because there's just not as much magic to go around, and it just like you run out. The Slann, however, resurged into preeminence because the geomantic web is still there, still functions, and is still pure as ever. And once the Slann got used to what the hell was going on, they once more resurged into being the most powerful wizards in the world. So I'm excited to see that the campaign is going to focus on this geomantic web. I mean, as a Lizardman player, I'm always scared I was scared when it was finally announced that the Lizardmen were going to be playable, because they are such an easy race to mess up, because there's so little lore on them compared to everybody else. You know, if you're a big fan of ogres or chaos dwarves or Skaven or anybody else, there is at least some other books you can read from that give you a better understanding of the race and other stuff like that. Like the hardest races to understand are the chaos dwarves, the ogres, and the lizardmen, because they show up in the fewest books. But of those three, the lizardmen have the very, very fewest. And even one of the books they do show up, which the only two books the Lizardmen have are, of course, the Burning Shores and, the Temple of the Serpent. Which, Burning Shores is a terrible book if you're a Lizardman fan. It's a fun read and it's a great book, but the Lizardmen in it are not lore friendly. They're very bizarre. But anyway, getting back to the point. So the campaign of the Lizardmen is going to focus on these various ley lines and re-establishing the power of the Great Warding. Because obviously, if you have a series of Nexus points that have a bunch of things built on them to harness their energy and strengthen it, if something happens to one of those sites, like an earthquake causes it to fall over, or a bunch of greenskins defile it into an idol of Gork, or chaos comes and profanes it with a terrible ritual to turn its power to chaos, then that point in the Nexus has now lost its power and is no longer strengthening the web. So for every point in the Nexus that is lost, the Great Warding doesn't get a little weaker. It gets weaker in like multiples of stages, because for every point that's lost, you're not just losing a single point. Every ley line that crosses it gets weaker. And some of these have like 8 or more ley lines that are crossing them, which in turn, so if you weaken that one point, then all 8 of those lines which cross through so many other points have now weakened. So the Lizardman campaign, what we've learned about it is that when you play as the Lizardman, you're going to be able to see the geomantic web. So when you're on the campaign map, you're going to be able to actually see the lines of power and all this other stuff. And your goal is, through the narrative campaign, if you decide to follow it, to shore up the vortex with the Great Warding, is to follow a series of prompts and quests that have you reestablishing the Great Warding. So capturing fallen sites that have fallen into ruin or have been captured by enemy factions, or performing rites or rituals to bring back power to those that have lost. Now, whether this is going to be a static static group. So, like, if you play the Lizardmen campaign, you choose Masamune as your starting legendary lord, then there's just, like, 40, or probably more like 20 settlements that you have to capture that are the Great Warding, and it's the same 20 settlements every time. Or if it's going to be more like you start off as the Lizardman and it randomly generates which of the various settlements that either start off as ruins or in the grip of another faction you have to capture. I don't know. Like, I'm kind of hoping it's based on, like, capturing a certain amount of settlements or various things that fall on the ley lines, and then once you capture enough of them, it initiates a quest which takes place somewhere about you strengthening the Great Warding. But that's primarily what the Lizardman campaign is all about. And what the article said is that if you're playing the Lizardman on the campaign, you're the only person who can see these ley lines, which I like the idea of, especially if it's, like, randomized what sites are critical for you to capture. Because if that was the case, then if you play a co-op campaign against the Lizardmen, or you're just playing not the Lizardmen, the AI is playing the Lizardmen, you don't know what they need to capture to achieve their goals to win the campaign. So I hope it's randomized or randomly generated, and I really like the idea. I'm so glad they decided to go with the Lizardmen building up the Great Warding and having their own take on how to save the world. I cannot tell you how worried I was that, Lizardmen and Total War were going to be more like the Burning Shores Lizardmen as opposed to the Temple of the Serpent Lizardmen. Which Temple of the Serpent Lizardmen are not perfect, but they're really close. That's Thankful and Bone Ripper. That's book 2 of his novel series, that's a fantastic novel series if you want to get into the various races coming in the upcoming game. So in any event, the last that's what we know so far about the Lizardman campaign, is that it's focused about the Great Warding and establishing the ley lines and following them and beating off the High Elves, Dark Elves, and undisclosed fourth race that's probably Skaven with a stick. Which then, so for my final point is that the second legendary lord for the Lizardmen has been revealed as Kroq-Gar. And we know it's Kroq-Gar because they released concept art of Grimlock, who is his mount, his Carnosaur. And they very cheekily blacked out, Kroq-Gar's on Grimlock's back, as you see on this image, but they kind of like cut him out so that you can't see Kroq-Gar at all. Which I thought was weird, but I guess whatever. Grimlock looks fantastic. I'm glad they went with his classic coloring and didn't mess with it too much. Like in the trailer, there's the blue and greenish Carnosaur, and Grimlock's just your tradition, is the good old fashioned red and pale, or red and cream. So I'm hoping this means that we're getting multiple colorations of Carnosaurs. Like if you take a Saurus Lord as your general, he has one color, and if you take a Saurus Scarvet on a Carnosaur, because the hero version of Saurus can actually ride Carnosaurs, then you get another different coloration, which is kind of what we already have with Griffins and Manticores, if I recall correctly. So that'll probably be expected, but I'm just excited to see it. In any event, though, so Kroq-Gar is the final defender of Zodal. He is a super crazy badass. Him and Grimlock are actually the oldest mount and rider pairing in the Warhammer universe. So Kroq-Gar's not the oldest warrior in the Warhammer universe, although he's very, very old. He's easily over, it's roughly 10,000-ish years old, give or take a millennia or two. But because he showed up right around when the polar gates collapsed. He's more about the 8,000 range. But him and Grimlock Grimlock's actually a tiny bit older than Kroq-Gar, because Kroq-Gar walked out of the spawning pools along with the very, very few others from his spawning, which of course marked them as super amazing, because normally a whole regiment of Saurus comes walking out of the spawning pools together, and in Kroq-Gar's case it was 5 of them, which the Lizardmen were like, oh shit, these guys are these guys are serious, these guys are the big deal. And Kroq-Gar is actually a favored Zodal, who is an old one. He's like the old one of great events, great warriors, stuff like that. And Kroq-Gar and Grimlock have been together for all those 8,000 years. Like, Kroq-Gar literally walked out of the spawning pool, and by the time he walked out of the spawning pool and got, like, all set up, the Carnosaurs, because you remember, lizardmen don't grow up. They come out fully formed, ready to go. And the lizardmen of the Temple City of Zodal had literally just finished breaking in a new group of Carnosaurs who were like the most terrifying, powerful brood of Carnosaurs to ever be captured by that Temple City. And of them, Grimlock was the biggest and the scariest. So of course, Kroq-Gar, being the most powerful of his group, took Grimlock as his own. Which I love that story. Kroq-Gar has a fantastic story. He's a great character, and him and Grimlock being like super old buddies, or master and pet, pretty much, of over 8,000 years is just bonkers. There is nobody else in the Warhammer universe that's had a mount for nearly as long. So I'm very excited to see the two of them. I'm hoping this letter truly means that it'd be really neat to actually see both Legendary Lords in a trailer instead of just one, like we had. Like with Game 1, you only got like Franz, Grimgor, Manfred, and any of them, actually. The Wood Elves, all of them only had like one of the Legendary Lords. Which I always thought was kind of dumb. Like, you figured they could just throw in the other guys. Like, the greenskin one I will give a little credit, because Azhag shows up at the very beginning of the trailer in kind of like a cameo. So I kind of wish they would do that with all of them. But I'm hoping with this letter we have, it means that Kroq-Gar is just going to come in and be, like, kicking the shit out of people. So hoping very, very much to see him. Of course, we know for a fact Masamundi's already in the trailer, because they've revealed about a 10-second clip of the trailer already, which I still find like it's a reveal trailer of a reveal trailer, essentially. It's just goofy. In any event, that's pretty much going to do it all for today. I threw in some other works of concept art you've probably seen while I've been talking. They've got the concept art for Masamundi, of course, who looks fantastic. He looks absolutely great. I actually wasn't 100% sold on how he looked in the cinematic trailer, but now that I've seen his concept art, I think he looks fantastic. Then, of course, the White Lions of Krace, who look amazing and awesome. And in Warhammer Online, I played a White Lion for a really long time, and got him all the way ranked up to rank 40, and had rank 80 renown, if any of you know what I'm talking about. Or I think it went up to rank 100 renown by the end of the game. I don't remember. It's been too long. And, man, I love that game. And the White Lion was just so fun. So, really excited to see them again. And then, of course, the High Elf Princess, which is a very welcome addition to the High Elf roster. Obviously, it's just a High Elf Prince being gender-bent, or, the female version. But, I really liked that the Wood Elves had male and female lords. I think for elves, that's a really good thing to show, because there is a famous High Elf princess, at least Princess Eldrea, who was a squire to Tyrion before she became her own kind of badass. So I'm very excited to see that, and I'm curious if they're going to be different. And I assume they'll be different in multiplayer. I imagine one will be slightly range focused and one will be melee focused, like they did with the Wood Elves. Though I imagine the range version is not going to be as good as the Wood Elf version, because there's no Prey of Aneth Rima and there's no Arrows of Kronos, to say the least. But we'll have to see. In any event, I've already talked for 30 fucking minutes, for way too long. So I will definitely be watching the trailer first thing tomorrow morning, posting a video of it probably immediately. I'll probably try and live stream it if I can. I'll probably just be live streaming tomorrow morning. So if you see me on Twitch, just come on by, and the moment it comes up, we'll stop what we're doing and watch it. So, hope you all have a great day. I hope this video was better than the last time I tried to talk about Total War Warhammer 2 news. I know a lot of people didn't like that, so hopefully this will make up for it. Hope you all have a great day. I will see you around, or tomorrow. So, till then, take care, and I'm so fucking excited. See you guys later. Bye.